Multiple players break out for the University of Arizona, and what could this mean for this squad going forward? Because there are some pretty big-time performances here.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. This show is brought to you today by FanDuel. Check it out, FanDuel. Again, this is the time of the year where you want to bet on all kinds of different stuff. Check it out at FanDuel.com. Okay, now, I'm Mike Luke, and again, host of Locked On Wildcats. Now, we are going to talk about Arizona, Utah. We are going to talk about players that really kind of emerged in a big way that I don't know that a lot of people necessarily saw coming. But if you watched in camp, you had an idea that these guys were more than capable of it. And the first one that we need to, and again, there were a lot of good players. And keep in mind, when we were going through camp, and I think this is where so many people were just surprised, is that, listen, as Arizona fans, we've seen Arizona media, we've seen a lot of bad football teams. We know what they look like. This did not look like a bad football team. It looked like a team that, quite frankly, had a lot of talent, and I think that's why so many people were kind of perplexed by just how bad, especially on the offensive side of the ball, this team was. But it is what it is. Now, so let's talk about some of these breakout performances. And the first one is that we've got to talk about is Keyan Burnett. Keyan Burnett, all throughout camp, was an absolute monster. He looked like somebody that was going to be a first-round pick and a 10-year NFL tight end. Listen, you know about his pedigree. That obviously his father played in the NFL here, Big Chester. He was a mid to high 4-star recruit, was committed to USC, obviously came here, just a ton of talent, also a little bit of a late bloomer though. And that's something that I think you got to keep in mind. He didn't have a position coach here or in high school. And so it was going to take a little bit of a time, but this second year, though, and this third year, keep in mind, he was behind Tanner McLaughlin the first 2 years, and Tanner McLaughlin was a monster. He's in the NFL now. Obviously, people know what he can do. But with Keyan was that guy all throughout camp. He was too big and he was too fast for basically everybody that he was going against. And I think that's where, you watched him and you're like, whoa, all right. There's a lot to like about this guy. He's about 6'5". He's a big dude. He's 6'5", probably 245, and he can move, and he catches basically everything that is around him. And I think that's also something that is incredibly impressive. He catches everything, and that is why you watch him and you're like, all right, man, this dude gets it. I think I think that just kind of the complaint, or I guess the concern is why wasn't he utilized in the first 3 games? Because, again, he was utilized all throughout camp. And the thing about him, too, is that he can catch, like I said, he can catch everything. He moves really well. He is kind of the prototype of what you're looking for in this new age tight end, and you just didn't see a ton of it. And I think that's where a lot of Arizona fans were very frustrated. You just didn't see it. In the first 3 games, he was targeted 5 times. So Matt Atkins becomes far more involved in the play calling for the U of A, and a guy that obviously has a lot of a tight end, has a tight end background. And that was one of the first things that you heard, is that Keyan Burnett was going to be utilized, and he was going to be continuously utilized and utilized even more. And it looked really, really good. If he can be that player that kind of becomes that T-Mac, or that kind of becomes the one that can take a little bit of that pressure off T-Mac, then I think that Arizona is in really good shape. And honestly, I don't know why he can't be that guy that takes a little bit of the pressure off T-Mac, because he's got more than enough potential to be able to do it. He is, like I said, in college, especially at this stage, even for being a late bloomer, he's a mismatch. And that's where you watch him and you're like, all right, this dude, this guy can be a problem. So I look for him to go forward, and I look for this to continue, especially with Matt Atkins far more involved in the play calling, which I think is something that we got to give Brent Brennan a lot of credit on, because I don't know that a lot of coaches would have done that. But better late than never. Watching Keyan Burnett, though, you know that there is something else that's going on there, and you can tell that this is going to be a problem for the rest of college football. And I don't really see this really going anywhere. Honestly, I think that I think he's here to stay, and you got to target him a ton. This is a guy that I think needs 7, 8, 9 targets per game. And because here's the other thing, he's also not just kind of this plotter. He, the tight end that just gets it. He is explosive. He can move. He can get out there and he can get past people. And you saw that in the catch to basically win the game, where he got past the guy and then Noah just dropped it in a bucket there. That's what Keyan can do. And Keyan's got more than enough ability to be able to do all of that. So, again, I think if you're Arizona, you just want to see this continue, because there's a lot to like about him, and I think he fits in very well. Obviously, that Servite quartet is special. The only one they missed out on was Mason Graham, who might be the best defensive player in all of college football. But you got the other four. Those dudes, like I said, they're all monsters. So again, Keyan Burnett, a huge breakthrough. Now, Kedrick Reesano. He's a player that it's easy to see why he was a top 10 high school running back just a year ago. He is big, he's pretty fast, and he can make people miss, or he can just move. He looks like an NFL type tight end, or he looks like an NFL type running back as well. He's just big, a guy that also just looks different. Listen, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I would be stunned if he plays the rest of the season. I think that thing is pretty much done at this point. But watching Kedrick Reesano, there's a lot to say. Okay, he can maybe be that dude. He is. I think you're going to continue to see him a lot more this season. I think there'll probably be some news on the running back situation coming up here. But I think with Kedrick, I think with what he brings to the table, this is a very, very good situation for Arizona. And I think the thing about him is that he complements Karnley well. Karnley can kind of be that jack of all trades out of the backfield. And then you got Reesano, who is bulldozing people over and also making it impossible to tackle him in the meantime as well. I look for him to be a massive difference maker. And next year, I think it's going to be him and Speedy in the backfield. I think that's going to be kind of your thunder and lightning. It's going to be those two guys. Keep in mind, I think, next year you got some nice running backs coming in, but these are going to be your upperclassmen. These are going to be your guys that have been around, and I think people are going to look up to and say, okay, that's it. Reesano is going to be a massive problem, or a big part of what Arizona football is looking to do. Again, he's another guy, just looks a little bit different. This was a very nice get. And Alonzo Carter does a very good job in the tight end or the running back room. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He gets and as long as he's here, there's never going to be a problem when it comes to running backs and Arizona being able to get those players, because he knows what he's looking for. Reesano, again, he did that against a very good Utah defense, and I think you're going to see him pretty much do it all season. The thing about him is he is a bowling ball. He is difficult to bring down, and not only is he difficult to bring down, he's also he also gets stronger as the game goes on. So I think between him, I think he and Qualley are going to be the guys this year, and then next year, I think it's going to be him and Speedy, and I think you're going to have a couple years of those guys. It's going to be fun to watch. But somebody that, along with Keyan Burnett, that looked really, really good in camp. Now, Burnett was one that I thought was going to star from pretty much day one, but that obviously didn't happen. Reesano, I think if Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt hadn't, he might have had to wait a year, but obviously Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt probably is done. So Reesano at this point is that dude. He and Karnley, you can do a lot worse than that. And I think you're going to see the Big 12 really start to get a real feel for what Reesano can do, because, I mean, like I said, that's what a top 10 high school running back looks like coming out of high school. They are bigger, they are stronger, and I think he's got a next level speed that he hasn't necessarily been able to show yet. And I think with a off season, he's going to be able to show that one as well. But Arizona's in very, very good shape at that running back position. Now, we're going to talk about a couple other offensive linemen here, and then we're going to get to the defense. But first, ROY. All right, here's the deal. Roy, Player of the Week. And this is a new platform and lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download ROY for iOS or Android and enter referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 in cash. So you get off the sidelines, you get into the NIL game with ROY, and support the players. Change the game with ROY. Download ROY for iOS and Android. Use code Locked On to enter to win $5,000 in cash. Again, get in there. You want to start contributing. You want to be able to start making some things happen for yourself. Check it out. Again, ROY for iOS and Android. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the offensive line as well. Let's talk about Alexander Deuce. All right, the Deuce Boost. I'm glad that they put him in there because, listen, if Leif isn't going to play, Ryan Stewart is, quite frankly, Ryan Stewart's just not good enough. This is the guy. Now, listen, the previous staff, I think, thought that he was going to be a big-time tackle for them. With him, he's not good enough. He just doesn't have the foot speed to be a tackle. But as a guard, he is more than good enough. He's big, he's physical, and he can get downhill. He was a nice little addition to the offensive line, and I think you're going to continue to see him be that dude pretty much all season. He is he's just a massive guy, and watching him, you know that there's something about him that you can see him, and he's just kind of. It looks like his best football is definitely in front of him. So keep an eye on him because, like I said, I think Arizona really knows what it's doing there. We will see, but I like what I've seen so far. And then I got to give Big Rhino some credit as well. Big Rhino obviously is a very, very good tackle. He's got a lot of potential behind him. I think the thing that he needs to be able to do is just continue to build on what he did. He in the Kansas State game, he obviously struggled. I'm not sure that he's fully healthy. But I will say that I think now, I think that right now it's also fair to say that he is you got two really, really nice building blocks there, and guys that in Rhino, I think you thought before the season he was going to be that dude. Deuce was going to be that guy. In some capacity, I just don't know that he thought that it was going to be. I just don't know that you thought that was going to be the case. But either way, good stuff. Now let's move over to the defensive side of the football because there's a lot to say. And first of all, massive shout out to Dwayne Aquina, and big shout out to Dwayne Aquina. And listen, I like Dwayne Aquina a great deal. I think he's done a very, very good job. I think he's a very good defensive coordinator, and I think he's going to continue to be. I think he needed a little bit of time to figure out what he had, and I think he's got some players now that are able to step in now. And I think with Isaiah Johnson, Isaiah Johnson, in my opinion, is the best interior D lineman on the team, and I don't even think it's close. He is maybe not quite as big as Chuba, but he's as strong as Chuba, and I think he's more active than Chuba. And I think that is something that I think Arizona fans have to be able to keep an eye on those. Isaiah Johnson, because I think he's a difference maker. I don't think that Chuba is necessarily a difference maker. But I do think that he's a guy that, with Isaiah Johnson, he can penetrate, he can get in there, and he can hold up at the line of scrimmage. You saw in the Utah game, he's huge. He stands out. Not a lot of guys are going to be able to move Isaiah Johnson around. And not only are they going to be able to move Isaiah Johnson around, he is going to be able to get upfield, and I think that's a real issue for teams that are going against him. I'm glad that he is in the lineup. He was getting about 15 to 20 snaps before. I think he's got to be in that 35 to 40 snap realm, and if he's in that 35 to 40 snap realm, then I think Arizona's going to be cooking with something. I think he's a guy with all conference potential. I really do. I think that he can be a game breaker on that defensive line. And again, I think you just need to see him get starter snaps, and you're going to be in a better spot. Then Stanley Taufel from USC. He was also very, very good in this game. He was constantly applying pressure, holding up at the line, and that was something too that this team just really, really needed. Is that they needed guys that were going to basically step up on the line and be able to make a difference. And he did that. Listen, when you're from USC and you got a little bit of burn before, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get some burn here at Arizona. I think the line showed up much stronger than it had in the past, and I think that's something that makes things a lot easier for some of the players that we're about to talk about. But that was those two guys were very, very nice breakout performances, and I think that you can expect more of that going forward, not less. So there's certainly that. And then obviously I think on the D line, Chase Kennedy is kind of that guy that's not really a breakout performance because he's played, but you're going to see a lot more of him because I think, the coaching staff likes him, and I get it. Then you've also got Trey Smith, not a breakout guy by any means, but he had a very nice game as well. But the entire defensive line I thought looked really, really good. And you're going against a Utah team that is big, that is strong, and does a lot of really good things. So keep that for what it's worth. But I do think that this is going to be a fascinating. I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch unfold. Now, what also had made it easier too is, and what also made it a lot easier is that. I think we're kind of at the point now where with Jacob Manu, he needed some people in front of him that were going to be able to take up some blocks. And I think you saw somebody that looked entirely different. Jacob Manu was back to doing what Jacob Manu does, and not with Jacob Manu. The thing about him is that he didn't lose his instincts all of a sudden. And so he was back being a problem. Then you got Tay Brown as well. Tay Brown is a dude that was another one that was a really good find by the previous coaching staff. You can't really bring him off the field. He's got good instincts. Not only does he have good instincts, he also, I think, just kind of, football just kind of comes naturally to him. So Tay Brown, also very, very good. And then getting into that secondary, you watch the secondary and listen, a couple breakout guys, Emmanual, Karnley. Arizona looks like they got something there in that defensive back because he's long and he's physical and he's instinctive. I think that it's probably Traden Stukes is probably going to be out for a while. And not only is Traden Stukes likely going to be out for a while, he's also going to he could be out for a significant amount of time. With Karnley, that's a player that you're going to be able to build a lot with. If somebody like Tacario Davis leaves, this is going to be somebody that's going to be probably thrust into that one of those spots, and he's good. He likes sticking his head in there. He did a very nice job filling in for Marquise Groves-Killebrew, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if those are going to be your starting corners next year if Tacario Davis moves on. I think you're probably looking at a Marquise Groves-Killebrew and a Karnley, and that's not the worst thing in the world. That was a very nice breakout performance for him. And then at the safety, and then at the nickel, Genesis Smith. Listen, we've talked about it before. This is a guy that's going to play in the NFL. Not sure exactly what position. Well, I mean, I am safety, but he's really, really good. Watching him, you also know that he's a player that He's big, he's strong, he's physical. Kind of feels like he was a little bit of a recruiting missy Val. As a matter of fact, he was a recruiting missy Val, and that's something that we will take. He should have been a higher rated guy. He's a monster, and I think next year he's going to be an all-conference player. But again, I don't even know if he really counts as a breakout player or not. But he's the dude that you watch him and you're like, all right, man, that guy's got a really bright future in front of him. So there was a lot to really like about what we saw from these players, just from a breakout perspective. And I think that's what's just exciting about all of this, is seeing players that are ready to take that next step that the coaching staff entrusted. And what is this going to mean for the team? We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But first, let's talk a little bit about, well, what do you say, FanDuel. All right, now check it out. This is the time of the year to get into FanDuel. You got the NFL, you've got college football. Then guess what? You got the NBA right around the corner. FanDuel. Again, here's the thing with FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page when you place your bets. Okay, get started again. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Again, makes it even more enjoyable to be able to watch the game and know, guess what? I got a little bit of skin in the game, and I think it's going to be very enjoyable. So again, check it out, FanDuel.com. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk about it. What are realistic expectations for this team? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow as well. But college football, the Big 12 title. I look around the Big 12, and this thing is totally open. Listen, I think before the season, Utah and going into the Utah game, people thought that Utah was the best team. And listen, you get back Cam Rising, maybe that changes. But I think with Cam Rising, you also got to understand that he's going to be injury prone, I think, at this stage. And he doesn't move like he moved before. That is something that I think is very apparent. And if he can't move like he moved before, I think that's a little bit of an issue for Utah. So there is that. And Arizona showed, too, that it matches up very well with Utah. So you got to be able to keep that one in mind as well. So there is that. Then you look at a team like, say, an Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State doesn't do a ton for me. They really don't. Kansas State, they're very good, but that also away from Manhattan, they haven't been very good. BYU is undefeated. They're solid, but I don't know anybody at Arizona that is intimidated by BYU. You respect them. Colorado, same thing. I mean, listen, Colorado, who knows? It could be the team that barely beat Baylor and got lucky, or throttled UCF. We don't know. But I look around this league and I'm like, man, Arizona's got as good a chance as anybody. And I think that's pretty much all you wanted. And I think a big part of that too is that the offense has to continue to build. And if the offense continues to build, then I think Arizona's going to be in really good shape, to be honest with you. Because I think this defense is going to be fine. I don't think it's going to be great, but I think it's going to be good enough. And I think that's what you're looking for if you're Arizona. Can this team be good enough? You've got in Tyler Loop, you've got a field goal kicker who is, he's an extraordinaire. He's one of the absolute best in all of college football. And if the game's close, you certainly like Arizona's chances with Tyler Loop. He is like I said, he's a stud. There's no other way around it. Tyler Loop is the man. And so I think Arizona's got more than a good enough chance to be able to compete for a Big 12 title. And honestly, if you win the Big 12 title, you're in the college football playoffs. And I think that's something that you certainly got to keep an eye on. And I think from an Arizona perspective, that's pretty much all you want. Listen, we talked about it before. I don't think anybody's happy with what happened in that Kansas State game. But if you were going to drop a game, you wanted to drop that one because that's not a conference game. That's something that I think is totally different. And I think that's also something where you're like, all right, well, you can make up for it by beating Utah. Arizona beat Utah, and they more than made up for it. Plus, you got a lot of guys that I think broke out, and I think that you got to be more than happy about. You got to be more than happy with that, because some of these breakout performers were players that I think are going to change the calculus for Arizona, because there is a lot of talent there, and it was about being able to see these guys really kind of show themselves. So again, Keyan Burnett, dude that I think is going to play in the NFL for a long time. Kedrick Reesano, Isaiah Johnson, Emmanuel Karnley, just a lot of different dudes that are going to be problems. There are going to be problems, and I think that's what's very exciting about that. Now we're going to look around the Big 12 this next show. Talk about who looks where, who looks what, because again, there's a lot of questions here, I think, for Arizona, but there's also a lot of questions for these other teams. But make no mistake, Arizona changed the calculus by beating by beating Utah in the manner in which it did. And I think you're going to continue to see that unfold, because like I also said, and I continue to say, there's too much talent on this team for them not to be better. And we're going to continue to talk about that. But on that note, as always, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. We will be back with you tomorrow talking all things Big 12. Bear down, back the A, and we will talk with you tomorrow.